that warm welcome. And it's an honor and a privilege to be a part of Mahabharata Upanayanam. And I hope I will be able to contribute my bit based on my travel experiences to it. This is a painting of Sri Krishna delivering Gita to Arjuna in the field of Kurukshetra, but it's done in a Pahadi mode. So it's a painting which is done in a very Pahadi miniature mode. And I clicked it on the walls of Kurukshetra. So to begin with this, so let me tell you a little bit about myself, besides what Sir has already told. These are the 5 books I have written. Of this, Lotus in the Stone is all about my journeys across India, and it covers a lot of sites that I'm going to talk about today. So a lot of what I speak about today, the details of the same you will find in Lotus in the Stone, Unusual Temples of India, and Ayodhya Mahatmya is a translation from the Skanda Puran based on my travels based on Skanda Puran in Ayodhya. So I spent about 10 days in Ayodhya studying Ayodhya based on Skanda Puran. So this book is based on that. And the earlier book, Mouse Charmers, it's a business book for those of you who are studying business innovation. Besides that, In Details is my travel blog. It's a bilingual travel blog, so we publish both in English and Hindi. My personal website, about 700 plus books reviewed. I curated the Indica Yatra conference in 2019 for Indic Academy, and we had it in Banaras in collaboration with the Banaras Hindu University. Detours is my podcast, and I'm going to refer to some of my podcasts today in my talk. Idhar Udhar is the Hindi version of it, and overall we have a fairly big, reasonably well-read and well-received portal with a lot of social media presence and all. With that, let's jump into Mahabharata. Now, Mahabharata, as we know, is one of the biggest epics we've had in India. It's even bigger than Ramayana, in terms of the coverage it has and the number of complex stories it has. So this is one of the rare Mahabharata time maps that I could find on the internet, and which is copyright free. It was published by a Pune-based company about 100 odd years back, and it's right now in public domain, and it covers all the places that are mentioned in Mahabharata, or how India was during the time of Mahabharata. We are not going to go to all these sites, but I'm going to take you to some of the sites that I have visited from the Mahabharata sites. And I'm going to restrict my talk to what I saw in the current state of those sites as they exist today. So I'm not going to go into the theoretical version of what Mahabharata covers and what it does not cover. I'm going to take you to a journey where I have visited and what I have seen there as of today in our times. The first and the most important place is, of course, Hastinapur, where the story starts and the story belongs. Hastinapur is also referred to as Nagpur in some of the texts. It is somewhere close to a city called Meerut in western UP, about 100 odd kilometers from, less than 100 kilometers from Delhi, on the other side of Yamuna. What remains there today is just a Jain temple. So this city must have become a Jain city at some point in time. And what you see there today is a beautiful Jain temple and nothing else of the Mahabharata era. Internet tells me that there is a fort called Parikshitgarh Fort, named after the King Parikshit, the last one of the last kings that we remember of Mahabharata. But I would assume this is a medieval fort or a very recent fort. It's not, it has nothing to do with Mahabharata per se. So Hastinapur really does not have too many remains, material remains that we can see. I assume there is a plan to build a museum, but I don't know how well or how, in what state is it. The next important site, of course, is Indraprastha, which is the current day Delhi. And incidentally, it continues to be the capital of our city even in our times. So it's one of the most important cities for us even today. Now, traditionally, in Mahabharata, the names mentioned are different, but the 5 villages that the Pandavas asked for from Duryodhan or from the Kauravas are today known as Panipat, Sonipat, Bagpat, Indrapat, and Tilpat. of these, Indraprastha is what became Indraprastha and the capital of Pandavas' kingdom, and what is current day Delhi. The current Delhi can be thought of as built from Indraprastha, but it was originally called Indrapat, not Indraprastha. So if we look at the geographical spread of these five, all these five towns exist today. Panipat, Sonipat, Indrapat, and Tilpat, they are on the left bank of Yamuna. You see, if you can see this very small little dotted line, that is Yamuna. And Bagpat is on the right side of Yamuna. So which means Pandavas had, when they chose these five villages, they chose it very, very strategically. They chose 4 on the left side of Yamuna and 1 on the right side of Yamuna to defend themselves, which is how an intelligent king would typically choose. Now, is this one of the reasons why Kauravas were reluctant to give them the asked 5 villages? We don't know. I don't know if it's discussed in the text or not, but this is how the geography of those 5 villages looks like. And we are going to, let's zoom into Indraprastha, a city that we know a lot more about. Those of you who visited Delhi, either as a tourist or if you've lived there, you would have gone to an area called Purana Killa, which is a medieval era fort, but the older fort, older than the Lal Killa, the more famous Red Fort. So it is now called Purana Killa. It has the Mughal era monuments, at least they look like Mughal era monuments today. But inside the fort is what used to be Indrapat village. Till about 1947, till the time of partition also, this village used to exist within this fort walls. And in fact, this fort was one of the places which became a major refugee camp during the partition, when a lot of people from Pakistan came and they stayed in this area. But later on, at some point in time, this was evacuated, and today it is more or less like a tourist spot, a monument which is preserved by ASI, and a lot of visitors visit it, and it's located in the prime locality of Delhi. But what has survived from those times are 2 temples. The temple that you see on your left is called Kunti Ka Mandir. It is Kunti's temple. Kunti, of course, was the queen mother, the Rajmata of Pandavas. So she must have had a huge temple or a powerful temple dedicated to her, or the one where she worshipped. Now, it's very difficult to find out the history of this temple, but in some magical ways, this is the only temple that has managed to survive within the walls of the fort. It's a very small temple. It just has a very small murti. And since the murti is all covered with all the flowers and garments, it's very difficult to even figure out what murti it is. When I visited, there was no priest, nobody was there, but it is a worshipping temple. So people do worship here, but not many people know of it. I mean, I have asked thousands of people who have visited Purana Killa, did you see this temple? And everybody says, oh no, we don't know. And it's right in the middle. So that's one temple that has managed to survive in the Purana Killa, in the Indraprastha area. The second temple is on the right that you see is a Bhairav temple, Bhairavnath temple. This is a fairly popular temple. It today is on the back wall of the fort, and it can be approached from outside the fort. So, and if you know a little bit of the geography of Delhi, so this is the wall that faces Pragati Maidan, the famous trade fair site of Delhi. This is a very, very well visited temple, and very famously liquor is offered to Bhairav here. So you see on the days when liquor is offered, I think Saturdays is when it is offered. You see a huge crowds, a lot of beggars, and Delhi government have had issues dealing with that. But this temple is not just supposed to be belonging to the Pandava era. It is believed that the Bhim carried the murti of this Bhairav Baba from somewhere. He carried it here and he installed it here. He did the murti sthapna himself, and very, very clearly it says it's a Pandav Kalin temple. It's a typical Bhairav temple. There was another temple called Shitla Mata Temple, which existed till 1970s in the premises, but during some excavations or some conservation efforts, that was destroyed, unfortunately, after independence also. So those temples we don't know, but I'm sure there were more temples which existed in this area, just like they do in all the fortified areas. You go to any fort in India, you will find temples existing. Even when the forts have gone to the ruins, the temples manage to exist in whatever small form. But in this, only the temple that is practicing are these two temples, to the best of my knowledge. Then there are two Devi temples which are ancient and surviving. The temple on your left you see is called Yogmaya Temple. Now this is a fascinating temple. This exists behind the Qutub Minar, the famous Qutub Minar. As we know, Qutub area was a group of 27 temples. Now, 27 number is interesting. These could be nakshatra temples. These could be yogini temples, because Delhi used to be called Yoginipura at some point in time. But the only yogini temple that has managed to survive is this temple on your left that you see. It is called Yogmaya Temple. It is also believed to be the temple dedicated to the girl who was exchanged with Krishna just after his birth. So his foster sister, who flew and who made this Akashvani that Krishna has taken birth and Kans will be killed. In lot of narratives, it is said that she went to the Vindhyachal Parvat and she stayed in Vindhyachal, and there she's known as Vindhyavasini. And I have visited Vindhyavasini as well. In Vindhyavasini also they say it is the same girl, but in Delhi also they say it is the same girl who was exchanged with Krishna, who is now in this temple. When I visited this temple is being taken care of by a family for last few hundred years. And they say that when Aurangzeb was destroying all the temples, he tried to destroy this temple, uh, and he could not destroy it. So his people would destroy during the day, but it would be rebuilt at night. And it kept happening, and Aurangzeb somehow got the message that this cannot be destroyed, so we let it be. It is a very small temple. Recently, some additions have been made to make it look like a bigger temple, but it is one of the ancient temples that survives. According to some scholars, she may be the Sthal Devi, or the Adhishthatri Devi of Delhi. But I would say the Adhishthatri of the Delhi probably is Kalika Mata, whose murti you see on the right side. She is the Kalkaji. You might have heard of Kalkaji as one of the posh localities in Delhi. But when I read about the history of Delhi in some of the Puranas, it seems that this temple used to be on a hill called Suryakut Hill, and on top of it that this temple of Kalika Mata is there. And it's again a very ancient temple, a very powerful temple, and a very well visited and a well worshipped temple. I won't say it's in the best of shape. It can definitely be much better temple, given that these are both these are some of the old, not some of the, they are the oldest temples surviving and oldest living and surviving temples in Delhi. Both of them could be in a much better shape, but whatever shape they are still the practicing temples. So this is what I know survives in Delhi from the times of Mahabharata. With this, let us move on to the next important place, which is Kurukshetra. We all know that Kurukshetra is where Mahabharata culminates. This is the place uh, where the war took place, and this is where the Gita was told. So it makes it a very important place. Now, today Kurukshetra is a town. It's a city, which lies midway between Delhi and Chandigarh, right on the trade route, the ancient trade route of Uttar Pradesh. But Kurukshetra is actually not a city. Kurukshetra is a region defined by the two rivers, Saraswati and Drishtavati. So these two rivers define the boundary, and it is also defined in reference to something which is north of Khandav, which is north of Delhi, east of Maru, which is east of Rajasthan. Today, Marusthal would be Rajasthan. And then west of a place which today is known as Sarhand, and in the south of this. So it is very well defined region. It's a region of the Kurus, which is defined, but Kurukshetra as a place, as a specific place where war took place and where a lot of events took place, is located in what is today called Kurukshetra. But Kurukshetra, the name was given after 1947. Again, in 1947, when a lot of refugees came from Pakistan, a camp was set up here for the refugees, and that is when the town of Kurukshetra was born. So it's not an ancient town. The ancient town, and I know this region very well. I have my roots in this region. My mother comes from this region. So this place locally is known as Thanesar. Even today, people living there, they don't call it Kurukshetra, they call it Thanesar. And Thanesar comes from the word Sthaneshwar. Sthanu plus Ishwar, Sthaneshwar. And this word comes from the temple that you see on the left. So this is the presiding deity of the region called Sthaneshwar Mahadev Mandir. And this is as old as at least Mahabharata, because this temple is mentioned in Mahabharata. And before I forgot to tell you this, that Yogmaya Temple is mentioned in Mahabharata. It is believed that when Arjun made that vow to kill Jayadratha before the sunset, and Krishna figured out that he cannot, this is not possible. They came and they prayed to Yogmaya, and she, with her Maya, she created she manifested a sunset, and which led to the killing of Jayadratha. So this temple is mentioned there. Coming back to Kurukshetra, so Sthaneshwar Mahadev is mentioned. This is the presiding deity, probably the oldest temple in Kurukshetra. The temple that you see on right is called Devi Ku Bhadrakali Mandir. This is a Shakti Peeth, one of the 51 Shakti Peeths. This is where the ankle of Devi had fallen. And it's again, since it's a Shakti Peeth, it's again said, if you go to the temple, they tell you that Krishna and Arjuna and Pandavas came here to pray before the war. But what is also mentioned is that Krishna and Balaram, both the brothers, they had their mundan. You know, in North we have this ceremony where they first cut your hair. It's called mundan in North. I don't know what it is called in South. So the mundan ceremony of Krishna and Balaram happened in this Devi Mandir. Mundan ceremonies typically happen in the Kul Devi Mandir. I don't know if she is the Kul Devi of Yadavas, but their mundan is specifically mentioned that it happened here. And when you visit this temple, you would also see a beautiful recreation. They don't allow any photography, so I don't have photographs. There's a beautiful recreation of the Chakravyuh of Abhimanyu. So whenever you go, you must see these two temples. So this is like the presiding god and the goddess of Kurukshetra. The next most important point in Kurukshetra is a place called Brahmasarovar. Now, Brahmasarovar is supposed to be a sarovar which was built by King Kuru, after whom the whole Kurukshetra is named, or the Kuru dynasty is named. He excavated this pond, and it is said that Brahma himself came down to conduct yagna here, and therefore it was named Brahmasarovar. The temple that you see on the left is bang in the middle. So if you see this map of this Sarovar, in the middle there is a platform where there are temples, and this is that platform and the temple. It is dedicated to Sarveshwar Mahadev. So there are many temples. It's a panchayatan kind of a temple, but the primary temple is that of Sarveshwar Mahadev temple, and it's a huge pond. Even in the Puranic stories, it says it's a huge pond. But even I don't know if it's still the same size, but in whatever shape it exists today, it is a huge pond. It has been recently renovated, but honestly, I feel it's the energy is missing. And it's my personal lament that they've put a lot of ceramic tiles inside the temple and all around the deity, all around the Shivalinga, which in my personal opinion takes away the energy of the place. Ceramic tiles block the energy that flows in a temple, that flows between the deity and the devotees. And I seriously hope that somebody um, from Kurukshetra or whoever is responsible, Haryana government or central government, they listen to it and they rejuvenate the temples the way they are supposed to be. It looks nice and neat and clean, but the pulsating energy that you feel in a Tirth Kshetra is missing as of today. Then we know that the war happened here, and when Bhishma died and he was lying on the bed of arrows, he wanted to have water. So Arjuna, it's said that Arjuna struck an arrow in the earth, and a stream of water went straight to the mouth of Bhishma. Now, that place where he struck the arrow became a pond that came to be known as Bhishma Kund. So today, Bhishma Kund is one of the Tirth Kshetras, Tirth Sthalas in Kurukshetra, and there's a small temple which depicts this. So you see Bhishma lying on the bed of arrows. You see 5 Pandavas, Draupadi, Krishna standing next to him, listening to him probably. This is a very small temple, obviously recently built, and these tiles is what I meant, that it is something that we need to do away with. Temple is not that important in most pilgrimage places. Temple uh, is a much later thing. What is important is usually a water body. So Bhishma Kund right next to it is more important. Another thing I forgot to tell you about Brahmasarovar is that Brahmasarovar is very, very famous for, in fact, all the ponds of Kurukshetra are very, very famous for a bath during the solar eclipse, especially during solar eclipse. So even in my childhood, I remember that every time there was a solar eclipse, there used to be a huge fair in these places, and people would go here to have a bath. Even today, if there's a solar eclipse, people go to Brahmasarovar and few other sarovars that I'll talk about in Kurukshetra to have bath. But how is it related to Mahabharata? It is said that Krishna first met Pandavas here during the solar eclipse. So during the solar eclipse, both Pandavas and Krishna had come here to take a bath in this pond, and that's when they first ever met in the story of Mahabharata. Coming back to the second picture here, this picture is a place called Jyotisar. Now, Jyotisar comes from Jyoti Sarovar. Now, this is supposed to be the exact spot where Gita was spoken. There is a small temple of Saraswati here. There are a few other temples here surrounding this pond, and they are trying to do a light and sound show to tell the story of Gita. But when I visited, there was nothing. It was a scary, secluded place with nobody around. It definitely deserves to do much, much better considering the value Gita holds in our life, the way it continues to show light to us in every which way. The place where it was spoken and which is very well documented needs to be very, very well preserved as well as presented. It needs to be a very, very good pilgrimage place. I wouldn't even call it a tourist place. It has to be a pilgrimage place where I can still go and listen to Gita whenever I want. Unfortunately, I couldn't find a copy of Gita anywhere selling in whole of Kurukshetra. I visited all the monuments. They have set up a beautiful museum. They are trying to paint the walls of the city, but if you try to ask them to give you a copy of Gita, they would say, "Oh no, we don't have it." But if I had my way, I would build a Gita library. Gita is one of the most read, most translated, most commented upon book, and this is the place where it was spoken. So I hope somebody does something about it. The next one, this left one, is again a very, very important pond in Kurukshetra. It is called Sannihit Sarovar. This is again a place where the bath takes place during the solar eclipse. And it is believed that every solar eclipse and every Purnima and every Amavasya, all the Tirth Kshetras of the world or of the Bharatvarsh, they come here in these ponds. So if you take a bath in this pond during these times, what is called as Parvas, if you take it, then all your sins are washed away. This is a small pond dotted with small temples of sun, Vishnu, Shiva, all kinds of temples surrounding it. But what I found a very interesting thing is during the British era, I think in the 19th century, some grant was made to renovate this pond. And it clearly mentions, besides the details of the grant that were made, it clearly mentions that in this pond, no fishing is allowed, no ahimsa is allowed around this pond, and no tree must be cut around this pond. And today, unfortunately, there's so much cement around it, you hardly see trees. You do see some trees in the picture, but those are the only ones around this. The place doesn't give you the feeling of being in nature. And just about 150 years ago, there's the stone, the grant stone still says that do not fish in this, do not cut any tree, you're not allowed, it's sinful to do that. With that, I'll take you to something little away from Kurukshetra, but not too far away. On the right, what you see is a Chandi Devi temple. This is the temple, or this is the Devi after whom the city of Chandigarh is named. And it's again a Pandav era temple, and or at least it existed during those times. And around this temple, you have a place where you have kunds named after, or ponds named after all the 5 Pandavas. And the priest there told me that this area used to have 365 ponds, one for each day of the year. And there is a temple which is named after Draupadi and Dharmaraj. There is a Draupadi Kund which is enclosed while all the other ponds are in open. And from here, this is the place from where they left for the war. And when they were going for the war, there's a village called Mallaha, where there is a frozen image of excuse me, frozen image of Pandavas going to the war. I could not locate it, but I hope to go there sometime to locate. Sorry. With this, we move on to the next location, which is the Panchal or the Kampilya. We know that Draupadi came from Panchal. Panchal was one of the major Janpadas, and Kampilya was its capital. This is the place where the Draupadi's Swayamvar took place. We all know the story. This is physically, this is somewhere in the western Uttar Pradesh, about 150 kilometers from Lucknow or from Agra. And today it is in a district called Farrukhabad. Now, why is this important? The reason I chose to show you this this particular image is that today the Uttar Pradesh government's logo comes from here. You see, the Draupadi's Swayamvar is what is the logo of Uttar Pradesh government, and today what survives there is a Draupadi Kund which has been cemented, so there is no water in that kund. Now let's move to Pandavas in the Himalayas. Now Himalayas, everywhere you will find stories of Pandavas, just like everywhere else in India, but I'll restrict it again to what I have seen. This is Hidimba Devi Temple in Manali. Hidimba, as we know, was the first daughter-in-law of Pandavas, married to Bhim, and they had a son called Ghatotkaч. So this is the temple of Hidimba Devi in a place called Dungri One. Dungri One means Dungar means a hill, and One means a forest. So it's a hill and a forest. a very well visited temple. She is the Adhishtatri Devi of that region of Kullu Manali. She is the presiding, she is the Kul Devi of the local royal family. The famous Kullu Dashera starts only when she gives permission for the Dashera to start. Right next to her temple is the temple devoted to Ghatotkacha, to whom I will come back in a while. So this is Hidimba, because we know that Hidimba never traveled with Pandavas. So Pandavas came to the forest, they got married, they had son, Pandavas left, and Hidimba was here, and we hear about her and Ghatotkacha only at the time of war again. Uh, this is in Himachal Pradesh. The first image is a temple called Hatu Mata Temple. It is about an hour and a half drive from Shimla, and it is located on a very, very steep hill. You literally have to drive upwards to reach this hill, and when you are standing, all you see is valley all around, and usually misty, foggy, and this temple makes an appearance and keeps disappearing. Inside this small temple is just a huge boulder, uh, which is worshipped as Devi. Now, it is not very uncommon in Devi temples to worship a stone, which is assumed to be the Devi. But here they say this is the place where Draupadi fell. So when Pandavas were going to the Himalayas, or they were their Swarga Rohan, as they say, they were going to the heavens. This is the first person who fell on the way was Draupadi, and this is the place where they say she fell. Now, again, there are multiple places. There is a route in Uttarakhand also where they say this is the route Pandavas took. There are multiple variations, and we would never know which one is right or wrong, but people here believe it, that this is the place where Draupadi fell. The place on the right is the place where it's called Chandratal in the Lahore area, Lahore Spiti area, and this is where the Duryodhan went to heaven. This is the place from where Duryodhan went to heaven. So I took this route from the first temple to the last temple, but I could not locate the places where the other four Pandavas fell, but they must have fallen somewhere on the way. The temple on the left is a representation of Kedarnath. I have not been to Kedarnath, but Kedarnath is again a temple which has a very, very strong connection to Mahabharata. It is said that after the war, uh, Pandavas had two shraps. One of Brahman Hatya, because they had killed Brahmins, and second was Kul Hatya, because they had killed people of their own Kul. So to undo that, they were suggested that they should go to the Kedar area and they should worship Shiva. Now Shiva was very angry with them, so he tried to hide when Pandavas reached there, but Bhim could get hold of Shiva, who was in the form of a bull, and he could get hold of his rear portion. So this rear portion is what you see here as at Kedarnath Temple also. This one I have taken at another Jyotirling temple called Jageshwar Dham in Kumaon area, but I believe the Shivling in Kedarnath is very, very similar. It's the shape that matters. The lake on the right is called Bhimtal. It's in the Kumaon region of Uttarakhand. And this again has a temple called Bhimeshwar Mahadev right next to it. And, I'll come back to this in a while. How much time do I have, Aishwarya?
Ma'am, we have 15 more minutes. Is that okay?
15 more minutes. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so the next one is Dwarka. Dwarka, we of course know that it's a city that Krishna and Balram had set up on the western coasts of India next to the sea. It's known as Dwaravati. It had a lot of gates, and it's a golden city, one of the most opulent cities described. But what is interesting is this temple on the right. It's called Indraprastha Mahadev Temple. And this is the temple where they said that this is the temple where Subhadra and Arjuna eloped when Arjun came to Dwarka to take Subhadra away with the help of Krishna. This is the temple. This is slightly away from Dwarka, few kilometers away from Dwarka, very small temple. Earlier, they say it used to be a cave temple. Again, now you see the marker of our times, the whole ceramic tiles kind of temple. It has a Shivling inside, which is called Indrashwar Mahadev Temple. Indra, as we know, is associated with um, Arjun. So Arjun is supposed to be the son of Indra. So this is a place which documents or which kind of reminds us of Arjuna's running away with Subhadra. And there is another temple next door where they got married, but I don't have the picture of that. Then we have this Balaram Yatra. You can listen to this podcast I have with Jijit Ji where he describes this in detail. So we have Saraswati part. Most of this yatra is what is now in Pakistan, but we have the last part of it starting from Hanumangarh district in Rajasthan till about Kurukshetra. I'll share the links later for both this and the Kampilya podcast where you can listen to these two in detail. This is a temple called Khatushyam. It's in Rajasthan in the district of Sikar. He's the presiding deity there. Now he is the incarnation of a character from Mahabharata called Barbarik. Barbarik was the son of Ghatotkach. So we remember we said Bhim and Hidimba's son was Ghatotkach, and Ghatotkach's son was Barbarik, who was believed to be a Yodha who had a boon that he, whichever side he represents, that side will never be defeated. So in Hindi, even today, people say Hare ka Sahara, Khatushyam Hamara. Hare ka Sahara meaning, and he is the god of the defeated. So if he is with you, you can never be defeated. He's the god of the defeated. Now when he wanted to participate in the Mahabharata war, Krishna sensed that if he participates, none of the sides will ever win because he'll keep switching sides. He will always be on the side of the losing side, and whichever side he is will never lose. So the war will never come to an end. So he made sure that he stays away from the war, and there's a long story. I'll give you the link to read the whole story, but he is reincarnated as Khatushyam, and he is the presiding deity of that region. Very, very popular. Very, very popular. If you see an arrow with a bow with 3 arrows, it denotes Khatushyam. Pandavas' footprints. Now, the story of Mahabharata travels in a certain geography, pretty much the horizontally. It goes from Gandhar to Manipur in the east. It doesn't come south, definitely not below Dwarka. Dwarka is the most south it goes. But Pandavas' footprints are found everywhere across the country. Let me walk you through some of the ones I have come in touch. The caves that you see on left are from Goa. They are called Pandava caves. There are 5 caves. There's a kitchen which has 5 holes depicting the 5 plates to eat or something like that. Now there are Shivlings inside these caves which are worshipped. The depiction of Pandavas and Draupadi that you see on the right is on the Panchkroshi Marg in Banaras, which is where Pandavas have which is a place they have visited as pilgrims. It's an ancient pilgrimage path, Panchkroshi Yatra around Banaras. On the left, I assume this is from Mahabalipuram. I assume most of you know this story, so I'm going to skip in the interest of time. The temple on the left is from Kanchipuram. It's a temple called Pandava Temple. Now, what I found interesting was that this is a temple dedicated to Krishna, but he is remembered as the Pandav Doot. He is as the messenger of the Pandavas, who was trying his best to avoid war to the extent possible. So I found this very interesting. Then what you see on the right is from Indonesia. It's the it's the it's the painting of Bhim, and I found that Bhim and Ghatotkach are two very extremely popular characters in Indonesia. In fact, I remember people kept showing me Ghatotkach, and they say, "How come you don't recognize him instantly?" I said, "Well, he's not as popular a character in India. We probably know his father better, but this is how stories and characters travel." The picture on the left is Bhimbetka in near Bhopal in Madhya Pradesh. It's the oldest rock shelter with paintings in India, dated at least 10,000 years ago. I'm not showing you the paintings, but what I'm showing you is the place which is called Bhim's Baitak, which means Bhim's Hall, which is what gives the whole area name Bhimbetaka. The river that you see on right is Chambal River. Today it is the cleanest river in India, probably with a very thriving ecosystem with a lot of ghadials and a lot of crocodiles and a lot of birds and fishes of all kinds and a lot of birds to see. But this has a Mahabharata connection. Now they say the game of dice in Mahabharata happened on the banks of Chambal River somewhere. And when Draupadi was disrespected, she cursed the river that it will never be worshipped. And it's to the best of my knowledge, this is one of the rare rivers in India which is not worshipped. And in the Puranas, the story, of course, says that the word Chambal comes from Charmavati, and it is said it is related to the yagnas that the rishis did, and the pile of charmas and the blood that flowed that converted into a river and a whole story around it. But the Mahabharata connection says that Draupadi cursed this river, and hence this river is not worshipped. Apart from this, you find, of course, we have Gandhar mentioned, we have Lakha Mandal in Uttarakhand, we have Shishupalgarh in Odisha, Manipur, Mathura has related to Krishna, a lot of stuff, Ujjain. There is a performance called Kuthu that is done in Tamil Nadu, which reenacts the Mahabharata every year, and the whole village participates in a kind of drama. There are Draupadi and Duryodhana temples in south of India, which I'm yet to see. And with that, I will bring my talk to the end. And if there are any questions that I can take, please let me know. These are my connection. And I will share a couple of links with you for Kampilya and for Balram Yatra.
Thank you so much, Anuradha ji. So we have a question in the chat box. Can we take it, ma'am?
Yes, please.
Okay. Our participant has asked, how can we reconcile with the fact that Mahabharata legends and related temples exist across India, although it happened in and around modern day?
Yes. Sure. Good question. I just shared the links. So that's a great question, and a question that I have had that, so for example, I live in Goa, and this was obviously in the Krishna Balram story, because this is where they got their divine chariot while they were fighting Jarasandha and all that. But it doesn't feature in the Pandavas story, and there are Pandavas here, and there are Pandavas in every part of India, every village of India. So there are two theories. One is that the descendants of Pandavas traveled and the stories traveled with them. Or the second is that simply the stories traveled, or the stories were so much an integral part of the living that, people wanted to own it. Even Shiva, he lives in Kailash. So why do we recreate his temples and we recreate the Kailash for him? Krishna lived in Mathura, Vrindavan, Dwarka. Why do we have his temples in South? So these stories traveled either with their descendants or later with their devotees, people who followed them, their devotees believed in them. The stories probably traveled with them. This is why are there multiple sites around the same story? Because everybody wants to own a part of it. So I'll tell you, there is one Jagannath Puri temple in Puri. Okay, Jagannath Puri temple, the original one is in Puri, but you have a replica of it in Hyderabad, you have a replica of it in Delhi, you have a replica of it in US. Why do we take the Jagannath Puri there? And it's quite possible that at some point in time they'll build an even bigger temple than the original Jagannath Puri temple, and we will start believing this is the original temple. So the temples and their stories and their energies travel with the devotees. So if the devotees of Jagannath Puri live in New York, they will build a temple of Jagannath Puri in New York. That's how stories and temples travel. And that's how they multiply as well. I have not been to Manipur, so I don't know about the sites in Manipur. As and when I visit, you will find them on In Details, my blog. Yes, it's the same temple. The same thing applies to everywhere. In fact, even Godavari is called Gomati Ganga. Kaveri is called Dakshin Ganga. So these stories travel. It's the essence. It's the it's the bhav that travels. How did I get interested? I have this book, and Lotus in the Stone. It's the story of my interests, from going from computer science to software industry to traveling to becoming a pilgrim. So I've documented that whole story of my falling in love with India and becoming a pilgrim. Please read that. See, the more you travel, I have discovered India by traveling around. So my one line answer would be traveling around.
Thank you, Anuradha ji, for attending to the queries.
Okay.
For concluding, let me take the privilege to thank our speaker, Srimati Anuradha Goyal. I should definitely mention that you really took us on a virtual tour to these sites and really instilled an interest to visit the places. Your travel experience and knowledge on the sites really inspired us to explore more. Thank you, Anuradha ji, for the lively and enlightening session. On behalf of Amrita Darshanam, I sincerely thank you for taking your time from your really busy schedule. Thank you, ma'am.